Terry Angel, Sheila Cash, Mira Rubin and Liz Williams for candid conversations that envision a new future.
Hello, ladies.
Hello there.
Hello.
There we go. Wait,
I apologize for that glitch. Oh my gosh.
we got the outro and the intro from us today. Welcome. Got it all. Welcome to the Broader Edge. I am Liz Williams, and I am with my co-hosts Mira Rubin, Sheila Cash, and Terry Angel. How are you, ladies?
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We are here today to talk about a topic that can sometimes feel uncomfortable when we're experiencing it. It's called liminal space. And we're going to start with a bit of a definition. Liminal space comes from the Latin word limen, which means threshold. It is a place of new beginnings. And it's that space between what has been and what's to come. And it can actually be a very powerful place of transformation. But depending on how we got there, it may not feel powerful. So liminal space can happen when we're between chapters in life. So it might be when we've graduated from college, or we're marrying, or having the birth of our first child, or perhaps even moving to a new location, all positive types of things that we're experiencing. But liminal space can also occur when we are thrust into something that we weren't anticipating happening. For example, the death of a loved one, an illness diagnosis, a job loss, a divorce. And in that case, liminal space doesn't feel powerful. It can actually feel very uncomfortable and even scary. And so our inclination might be to move through it quickly, or to do something to change things. But we can't always change the circumstances. The only thing we can do is move through it and see what it has to teach us. And so if we can get to that place of accepting the lack of control and the disorientation that we might feel and surrendering into it, we are likely to learn something about ourselves and about life. And we are also invited to explore possibilities within ourselves that we may not be aware were there. And so if we can stay there, on the other side of the liminal space, we emerge into a new space of being that can be more alive and more powerful and more free than perhaps we've ever experienced in life. And so therein lies the power of liminal space. So liminal space can happen to us individually in our own lives, or as we are experiencing now for perhaps the first time ever on the planet, it can happen collectively. And so we're going to explore in this hour both of those topics. But we're going to start with looking at our own lives and where we've been in liminal space and how perhaps we've navigated it with grace and ease, or perhaps not so much so. So I would love to open it up and see who might like to dive in and begin the conversation. Oh, I see that look from Mira.
I want to say I'm not ready to dive in yet, but I just love the introduction. Because in my thinking about liminal space, interestingly, it was mostly crises that I was thinking about.
Yep.
So hearing that the other transitions from college or job, even job promotions or a new job with a new company could be. So now I can jump in.
Okay.
So I've experienced a number of different times in my life where I was thrust into liminal space. And even in the positives, I think what we're talking about is a passage, as you said, from what's familiar to what's unfamiliar. And even if it's a positive passage, it can be really stressful and disorienting and challenging to our identities. So I have remade myself multiple times in my life. And so I would say the one that comes to mind at the moment that is probably one of the more profound was when I had been working as a sales rep, actually, an outside sales rep in optical industry. And I'd been there for like 10 years. And there was one point where I just said to myself, I don't care what happens. I'm done with this by January. And then that passed and I got back into the flow. And months later, January rolled around and all of a sudden there was an altercation with my management that ended up, I was out of the job.
Wow. And
it was amicable, but it was from that declaration. And the thing is that I hadn't anticipated it, actually, even though I had declared it. And as a result, I was kind of left spinning. And it gave me an opportunity to truly recreate myself after a lot of, I think a lot of despair, because I really just didn't know what to do next. I just didn't know where to go. And so what I ended up doing is I ended up going back to art school. I mean, back to school for an extended degree in computer animation and multimedia. And it launched me into a whole new career path from where I'd been.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was not an easy passage.
Nope. No, it oftentimes isn't, but I love that you're pointing out that what looked like an ending or was an ending was just actually a beginning of something completely new.
And all endings are.
They always are. And perhaps even something that was better suited for you.
100%.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
For sure.
Yeah. And you know, for me, there have been so many times in my life when there were crises and what I call the fires. And I didn't realize it until the most recent one. Last year I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it was in that time that I really felt so lost.
Mm-hmm.
I went from a world of knowing what my days were going to look like, knowing how everything was in my life, to just being thrown down this hole. And it's like, okay, you're going to stay, kind of like, you're going to stay there until you can come back out again. And it was so devastating, but I really felt alone until I just sat with it. I sat with it. And you have to go into an acceptance when you're in that space. And those fires that come at you in life, they're your biggest friend, your best friend, actually, because once you get through the other side of that fire, you are changed. You are totally different than when you went through it. And there were so many beautiful things that happened during that time last year for me. Beautiful people that stepped up, the support I didn't realize I had. And so when I went into that hole, and I went into that place, I was like, oh my God, not again, because it wasn't my first physical trauma in life. But once I was able to step away from the poor me and go to, what do I do with this? What am I supposed to do with this? And I think it's our perspective as we're going through those that really turn us around to be able to get through. So as I was in that space, I was really spinning, like you were saying, Mira. That spin happens and you're like, oh, will it ever end? You know, you go to all of those places that we don't want to go to. But when we get slapped or knocked down, that's what happens. So I'm really grateful for every experience I've had, but especially this experience that happened last year. And when you said we were going to do this as a topic, Liz, it really made me go back there. I went back and really examined that time that I had, a time of growth, because that's what happened. Once I stopped the spinning and stopped participating in all of the low vibration and said, all right, what can I do with this? What are my options? And that's what we forget, is any time, at any point, we do have options. So to me, that was the key of being in that space and stepping back and observing, which was the best thing I could have done.
Was it hard to go back, Terry, and think about it? Or were you able to look back and think, no, there was growth and it was so positive in the end that it wasn't difficult to go back and think about it?
It wasn't difficult, although I remember very well getting that diagnosis. I remember the moment and time stopped and all of that. I do remember it, but now it's with a different, just a different emotion than before when I would go back to that place. And I've heard many times, if you can tell your story without crying about it, then you're approaching that healing of that event and that all those emotions that come up with it. So yeah, it's not easy, but it's easier as I look back, and so grateful for the experience because I gained so much from going through that. Not just having support from people, but really understanding, having a deeper understanding of what women especially go through when they're diagnosed with breast cancer. There's no way we can understand that fully until something happens like this. And I don't wish it on anybody. I'm just saying,
Right.
I know from the minute you get that diagnosis until you go through the treatment, I know what that's like.
And you have gone on to share that. I mean, you have recognized that this is a purpose of your life, and you are going to be there to support others who are walking through it.
Yeah, absolutely. Not just breast cancer, any trauma like that. Absolutely, just going into healing the emotions, because that's the part that's not dealt with.
Yeah.
The physical is what's dealt with, is to save the life. But the other part of it, that whole other scenario of the emotions, that's not even dealt with by the doctors.
Mm-hmm. Sheila, how about you? You want to share your experience?
Well, I was so excited when you introduced this topic, and it brought up so much in me because there have been many times in my life, a great deal of significant deaths in my life. But the time that stands out the most was a major separation. While I had 3 kids, I actually was still nursing the youngest, who was a baby. And, you know, and I remember saying to some of those around me who were going through grief, I said, you know, it's really a luxury when you have that space and you can stand back, you know, you can sit back and really process. Because when you have a great deal of responsibility, you know, you don't, you know, that's, you typically, you put that to the side, you put it to the side. So liminal space is so important for us, and it's so necessary, really, I think, you know, and a lot of the kind of spiritual processes and techniques that sort of have these time hacks and these shortcuts and things never particularly worked for me. I really prefer the liminal space. But, you know, I have to also say that because I've had so much responsibility in my life, and very, very rarely have I been kind of, you know, responsibility free, that I have always held liminal space in some way, at some point in my consciousness, to hold that space, literally, that may not have been free space wise, talking about, you know, where do you go to get the space time wise, and in many other ways. So for me, I found a way to be able to hold that liminal space, and to do that processing kind of just all along the way. But during that one particular period, it was about resetting, regrounding, like Terry and Mira are talking about, and rethinking my entire life. So it's like that snowball. It's like, once you start, at the beginning, it's like, where do you start and where do you end? Just went so deep that I was questioning the universe. I was questioning, God and spirit. And I mean, I took it to the limits, which really ended up becoming my first book. Which was really all about gaining multiple perspectives and looking at the bigger picture. And so I gained a tremendous understanding of the human condition itself through many, many opportunities to do that, to question it and to look at it, and that led me on the path, to where we are today. And I can't imagine not having had that space and not having gone through that. And so after you introduced this, Liz, I thought to myself, where would I be? And you asked Terry the question, was it hard to go back? And I think to myself, it was life-saving. So I really consider it to be a life-saving level of consciousness.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I'm curious if you all feel like when you're going, has it gotten easier to move through liminal space as you've gotten older, since you've been through it? And of course, we can't anticipate what's to come, but do you feel like you're more prepared to navigate through the changes that are inevitable? Or do you still feel like, oh God, I hope I don't have to go there?
I think what's changed for me as I've gotten older is just trusting more, and accepting that life works. And as I operate more from that place, I'm able to interact with circumstances from a place of, well, what's the opportunity? Yeah. Like, what's the gift? Because all the traumas in my life, first were exacerbated by my resisting them, and also catastrophizing them, and playing a role of victim, feeling at the effect of instead of at empowered. And now I come from a very different place. So it has been a lot easier. And I find myself more excited because I know there's change on the horizon, and I know how transformational these cataclysms in my life have been for me in the past. And now I don't experience those things as cataclysm anymore.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, I think we learn some tools as we go along our path, and the tools of really going into acceptance. Like you were saying, there are so many things we push them away because we're like, I don't want that, but it may be the best thing for us. So when something does come up, it's there for a purpose. And if we can just open up to what can I get from this? And that was my big question as I went through my experience last year. What's this all about? And what am I supposed to do with this? And I actually said that out loud. What am I supposed to do with this? And I think once we can reach that and start to allow that it's not happening to us, it's happening for us, then we can change that perspective and really examine it. And yeah, I think I was in a much better place to handle that experience last year than I would have been even 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I was much better equipped with the tools that I needed to really deal with it, and deal with it on all levels.
Yeah, I really think that that chance to be with yourself and to truly discover your authenticity. And we hear so much about authenticity. It's an often used, if not overused, term these days. But that has been the centering of my life. And as long as you continue to realign with your authenticity every step along the way, you're expanding your life, you're expanding your consciousness, you're moving forward, and there's not as much need for the liminal space because, as Mary said, as we're all saying, we're practiced in it.
Mm-hmm.
It gives us the grounding and the practice to be able to move forward. We're more familiar with that space and we know what to do with it, which is a beautiful thing.
It is. I love this. And I'm thinking a couple of things that you've commented on. One, that even positive events can be very challenging. And when I was thinking about the liminal spaces I've been through, and some have been very difficult, but the ones that came up were after I had my first child. And we'd gotten home from the hospital and I was nursing him. And all of a sudden had this revelation that I was stuck. Like he was so dependent on me. I was no longer free to just hop on a plane and go somewhere or, do what I'd been used to doing. And it was so this was this positive. I was thrilled to have him, but it was really, really, it kind of hit me like, whoa. And at that time, kind of what Sheila was saying, that I didn't really have the bandwidth to figure out what was going on. At that point, what I did in life was I just said, okay, deal with it. And you kind of like just shove it down and go, this is what it's going to be, and just shove it down. I remember around the same time, we actually were robbed in the home that we were in, and that we were asleep upstairs and they came in through the downstairs. And so it was one of those things again, where it was just so terrifying that I was like, I can't even go there. So I just like shoved it down. But interestingly, on the other end of having children, the empty nester syndrome, which we've just entered into as of last August, it was completely different. It was also a huge transition in life, but I knew it was coming and I knew there were lessons in it. And so there was pain in it, but there was also excitement about what the next chapter was. So you kind of do learn to navigate through it and handle it with more grace than perhaps you might have when you were younger. Or so that's
another thing about that, though, in navigating it, I don't want people listening to think that it means that it's easy, that you cruise through it. Like Terry, you said, you went through a really, really dark time. It doesn't mean you're not going to be collapsed on the floor in gales of tears from moment to moment. But the thing is that as we experience more, we can even allow the space for those gales of tears if they arise. And to know that, to keep it in the context of this is part of a process. And as horrible as this might feel now, I've survived these transformations before.
Mm-hmm.
And to let that inform our fortitude.
Absolutely, and ask those deeper questions. What am I learning in this? What is my soul? Where is the soul's growth? Why this? Why now? So, yeah, beautiful. Well, I'd love to transition to, and we can always circle back here, but to larger collective liminal space that we're experiencing now. And as I said, it's really unprecedented as far as we know. There's never been a time where everyone on the planet is experiencing something. Obviously, we're not experiencing it in the same way, but we know that we're all experiencing this liminal space as a result of COVID. And so what opportunity is in this? It's been really challenging. And there are things I hope we never have to experience again. But we also know that it's inviting us to something much greater. And so what openings do you think are happening, or do you hope to see happening as a result? And as things go back to some sort of normalcy, what will it look like, do you hope?
Well, I have noticed so much connection during this collective liminal space. And it's supposed to be the opposite. It's supposed to be the social distancing and staying away from each other. And we're not even being in large gatherings with strangers. Yet I have met new people in these last couple of months, all online. But, we had talked, our last show was about finding your tribe. I have been surrounded by tribes members and, so much incredible connection. I've seen it out, in my community with the kids. And it reminds me of many decades ago in the best way, in the best of ways. People are talking more. They're wanting to be together, coming back to themselves and coming back to each other. And that, for me, in the beginning was unexpected. That was one aspect that has been incredible, I think, for our species.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree, Sheila. It was a surprise to see all the communities forming, but also the communication part, like you were saying, families talking to each other, talking, instead of just texting or not communicating at all. There was that wanting to reach out. We're going through something big, so let's gather together. Let's do this together instead of feeling so alone with it. And that was what I experienced as well. It's just really bonding with people, and people that maybe I hadn't talked to in a long time, just reaching out to check in, see how they're doing. Yeah, it was a gift. For me, it was a gift. I mean, I understand the down part of it and the deaths and the illnesses, but to me, it was that time when I could really sit in with myself and go in deeply to those deep questions. What is this all about? And really ask that and look for some answers inside.
I want to amp this up to a whole different dimension, and that's like the planetary dimension. I think that, we know, whether we choose to engage in it or not, we know that we are threatened. Our survival is threatened by our behavior on this planet. And what I mean by our behavior is our consumption of resources and our polluting of the environment and our killing off of the soils. And we really are in an emergency situation before COVID showed up, in terms of the requirement that we act in order to change the course that we were rocketing towards. So what I see as COVID, a miracle, really nothing short of a miracle. I see that this has stopped that frantic, headlong race to destruction enough. I hope, I pray that it has stopped enough of that momentum for people to have used this opportunity to go inside and to reassess our values and to reconnect with nature and to rethink the way that we're living. I mean, I understand that there are more victory gardens sprouting up now than there have since the World War. This is a really positive thing. As people are getting more connected to their food source, as we're bringing economies more local, as we're getting more connected with each other, hopefully we're getting more connected with the world that we live in, and are willing to recognize that it means some changes. And we've been confronted with this massive change in response to COVID. Hopefully we can then recognize that we have the facility to continue that change in a way that will ensure our future on the planet, which means some radical action. And we haven't talked about that a lot, not just us, but I mean, as a culture. But we've all talked about how nature is asserting itself. And we recognize that there is an opportunity to heal. And I think one of the reasons that so many people haven't put a focus on turning things around is because they felt hopeless and helpless. And now when we see that nature can re-emerge, that hopefully that will, along with the shift of momentum and values, I pray that it's going to allow us to turn this thing around, and therefore it could be the greatest miracle humanity has experienced, at least in millennia.
Well, you know, you bring up gardening, and that was a second thought that I had too. That you know, just on a personal, back to a personal level, I have had many years with gardens when I was raising my kids, and you know, I had a huge property and planting, and I have missed it for many years. So I have gotten back to that with container gardening. And I tell you, the seed companies, especially seedlings, are like 2 months on back order. I was buying back, you know, back in March, and really just getting started with a lot of those now. But you know, along those lines, Mir, with not being it, you know, there's a lot of meat that is not available, and of course we have all the problems with the plants, the meat plants is what I'm talking about, you know, and the chicken, you know, farming and so forth. And so for those who are not plant-based, and we are mostly plant-based, but we've gone quite a bit more because it's not available. And so that's another way that, you know, for the animals and for the health of the people and for the immunity of the people, is another, you know, another trajectory that we're headed on, which is really a good thing for humanity.
And I just have to jump in because you're talking about animals. So much of the way that we have farmed our manufactured our meat, forgetting that it has to do with live creatures, has been so horribly inhumane and highly polluting. So what else besides something like this could move people away from eating so much meat too?
Yeah. It's kind of amazing the things that have happened that were unplanned. But to your point, you know, when we look at animal welfare, the issues aren't so much the puppy mills, for example, or what's happening at our humane societies. It is the manufacturing of our meat, you know, and our animals and how they're treated. And there just hasn't been enough of a spotlight shown on those issues. And you're right, this is starting to bring those things to light. What do you think it's going to take to not come out of this and just go back to things the way they've been?
I love that question, and I don't have an answer, but I will respond by saying it just feels like things are not going to go back to the same. It just feels like, you know, I feel it at such a depth that people are seeing a new way. And for some, these practices, these sort of the retro practices for some of the younger generations are brand new. But everyone's living it. It feels better in so many ways. And, you know, you know, nobody can say for sure, but it just really feels like we are going to move forward. And I say with that, I've been using the term back to the future, because, you know, there's so much retro that we're finally recapturing and pulling that into the future. And I think I do really think there's going to be so many improvements that we'll see that are for the good, really for the good.
I think what it might take, and I think the question is, how many individuals were deep down not happy with the way things were? Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think in so many cases we just get into this is the way life is, as if we have no choice. And you kind of get on that treadmill and you don't know how to get off and you don't know how to shift things. And if you're the only one that you feel like is, you know, concerned about it, you just kind of go with the way things are. And I do think this has given us time to really step back. That time, as Terry was saying, you know, to really some quiet time, if you're willing to take it, and start asking a lot of different questions. And if we do that individually and then start talking to others about them, I do think it's possible for us to say, I'm not going back to this. Whatever it is, if each of us were just to choose 2 or 3 things that we say, I'm not going back to this, that would shift things significantly.
It sure would. And you know, we've always heard that when we say there's got to be a better way, that's when intuition kicks in, and when we start looking at a better way and what is that better way. And I think this has given us that opportunity to see, yeah, things weren't working the way they were. So what is that better way? How can I make a change myself that's going to contribute to that new world in a way I want to see it, not in the way it was. And interesting that when we start going back out into our world, we're going to see the familiar things that were there before. But I'm thinking there's going to be a way of looking at them that's different now, that's looking at like pollution, what's polluting the air, and really looking at that instead of just accepting that as the norm.
Mhm.
So I think that that mother of invention of there's has to be a better way is what's really kicking in for a lot of people. A lot of creative ideas are coming out of this.
Mhm.
I'm inclined to think that things have to be broken enough that they can't be fixed.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I see in this whole scenario, this whole situation, is that we are shining light on things that are broken. And we see how, and I think we're going to continue to see how the structures that we have do not work, how our healthcare system is not sufficient to take care of us, how our system of higher education and student loans and working for a paycheck and like there are lots of things that I think this has caused us to question, and I think that is really, really important. People that would never ever have questioned the status quo are asking questions now, and I think that we really need to see how broken things were in order to have the impetus to go through the challenge of creating something new. And I pray that things got broken enough so that people realize we never get to go back. And that's a wonderful gift. Thank heaven we don't get to go back.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really struck me, and my most recent blog post I wrote about this, because the question that keeps coming to me is, how did we let this happen? And I'm not talking about, how did we let the environment get so bad, or there are so many questions about how have we allowed this, but how did we allow this COVID pandemic to occur? Because when you start to look at the questions behind where did it come from, who knew about it, who didn't, there are so many unanswered questions. And it's really caused me to question our leadership across the board. To say, are those who should be minding the store actually minding the store? And if they're not, what do we need to be doing about it? And it says to me, we need to be taking more responsibility individually. I mean, each of us, these things need to happen, Mira, what you're talking about, need to begin happening from the grassroots level. And we need to take responsibility and start saying, I don't like the way things are. I don't accept it this way. And I do believe, as Terry commented on the intuition, it can be better. I know it can be better. But in order for that to happen, we're each going to have to take some responsibility and step into something that may feel uncomfortable or into, unknown territory. But that's how it's going to change, I believe. What do you think?
I think that while we're all paying attention to what's happening with COVID, there are people working behind the scenes to run certain agendas that are not necessarily in the direction that we would like to see them be running, first of all. So this is an opportunity while everybody's looking left to go do something right, or looking right and do something left. And I think that one of the things that we can do as individuals is to be looking at what's happening politically in terms of legislation while everybody's putting their attention on COVID. That's one thing that we can do. There are a lot of organizations that are activist organizations that are keeping track of those kinds of things. So you can be looking for petitions online. You can be looking, like I have a particular commitment to the environment. So Greenpeace is an organization that's very active in combating the plastic epidemic. You want to talk about an epidemic, that's easily as powerful as what's happening with COVID. Now, the other thing is, and this is controversial, and we're the broader edge, so the other thing is that there are the standard powers that be when it comes to the medical model and the medical establishment, and there are voices of people that have a lot of research behind them that are not in line with the whole concept of what's happening with this virus, and not in line with the possibility of forced vaccines. And this is going to be an issue for all of us to contend with, and it behooves each and every one of us to educate ourselves about. I'm not going to make a stand here one way or another. I am going to make a stand to say it is really important that we each educate ourselves about this topic, because it is something that is going to challenge our freedoms and our health and well-being. And the truth is that lots of people that have opinions and facts also that challenge the prevailing powers that be are being censored. Sites are being taken down. People are being taken down off of YouTube. People are being censored from a bunch of different areas. People are being hacked. And so there's this weird underground thing going on, and I don't want to be talking conspiracy theory, but this is something to pay attention to. And so please do your due diligence, so that when this arises, and it will arise, the push to have mandated vaccines, when it arises, be informed. Just be informed and be able to make a conscious and deliberate choice for yourself around that.
Yeah, Mira, I totally agree. Knowledge is power. And the more we bury our heads and say that's not real, well, there's a lot that's not real that's coming out, but examine it. Do your own research is what I say. Because I get messages and private messages and things all day long. And it's like, this is happening. I'm like, you don't know what to believe. But when you really look and say, okay, is there any truth to this? And do the research. And that's what I'm saying. Use your power of knowledge and your ability. Google, go find out what's happening.
Some of it is being censored from Google too.
I know. Yeah.
But as you said, Terry, I think it also comes down to your intuition and your gut. Do the due diligence, educate yourself, but trust yourself. You know what is right and wrong for yourself, for your family, whatever. It doesn't have to be right for everybody, but you know that if you're willing to really listen in deeply. And that's what I've been surprised at, some of my reactions to what's been going on since this happened. And it's really been kind of a revelation for me of what's really important to me. And to your point, freedom, all of a sudden I've realized how important freedom is to me. And I've always been, happy that I live in a free country, but are we really free?
Right.
And anymore? And how important it is for me to focus on that and to fight for that if I need to. So
I'm glad you brought that concept up of freedom too, Liz, because I always felt, freedom isn't free. We seek freedom, we can get to freedom, but the path to get there, the ticket to get there, isn't free. But, and I think, Mira, what you're speaking to in terms of leadership is that, this pandemic is just opening the lens on the state of leadership globally, which is a great thing, because the more that we see, the more that we know, the more we understand, the more that we can do. This is, as time keeps moving along, we do have, relatively speaking, freedom, right? I mean, especially in this country, we have relative freedom, and we do have power. We have power of the internet, and despite despite the censoring, we will absolutely overcome. But as long as our eyes are opened, and this pandemic is opening our eyes.
Yes,
Can only hope so.
Yeah.
absolutely.
What gives me hope actually is hearing people that have been deeply committed to maintaining the status quo, like deeply immersed in it, actually coming up with questions about, wow, what this system doesn't really work. What about, our food supply, our food chain is getting disrupted. What does that mean? What about how do we shop local? Or, there are some evolutions that are occurring even in the deeply entrenched people that just are more mainstream. And I'm related to some of them, so it's amazing to see that their minds are opening. I could never pry their minds open, but this circumstance is even prompting them to think differently, that's what gives me the most hope.
Mm-hmm.
Awakened people,
Mm-hmm.
or people who are already on a path, those people we would hope were going to be conscious. But when it reaches into the people that don't think that way, the people that were happy with life the way it was, when they start asking questions and they start questioning the structures of things, that's when we have a real indicator for change, I think.
So I'm curious to kind of move to end on a high note. Things are starting to open up. We may still be in this liminal space for quite some time, but as things start to open up, what do you find yourself appreciating most? What are you kind of excited about? Perhaps something that you have a new perspective on as a result of this, and you're looking forward to. As we open up to that becoming more a part of your life ongoing.
Hugs. Definitely
Yeah,
looking forward to hugs.
For sure. Yes.
What I'm really excited about is that we are all being forced to rethink everything.
Yeah.
What else, but this level of shakeup is really going to shake people out of the old, because we will naturally gravitate toward what is better, what is working, that as humans, that's what we do. Some people take more shaking than others. But ultimately we will. But letting go of that, those ingrained, instilled patterns that just are not working, are not good. This is what it's taking. And I am so happy about that aspect of it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing some relationships that were developed during this time. We bonded together because we were in a common experience. We were all going through it. Nobody was exempt from this. So those of us that really came together and said, I'm here, let's support each other. I've developed some really wonderful relationships during this time with people across the globe. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that continues afterward. And it takes making a conscious effort to continue it, just like with any relationship. So I'm looking forward to continuing that open communication and seeing how we still support each other on the other side of that isolation time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I really am looking forward to being, like, going out to dinner, being with people, like, kind of as Mira was saying, the hugs and just being with people face to face, but being able to have these kind of conversations, because it's going to be a long time before we're not talking about COVID, right? Or this, what we've been through. So it's regardless of who you're with, it's going to come up. And it's going to be really fascinating to hear everyone's perspective on it, because it will be different, but everyone's going to be, I think, convicted about something, because it's hard to come out of this and not be. So I'm kind of excited to see, what people share.
I think that we haven't begun to feel the ramifications of it.
Yeah.
So the social ramifications of it are going to, that it hasn't even started.
Yeah.
The economic fallout from it, the policy sort of things that may show up. I think that this is the flashpoint, but we have a fire yet to walk through.
I think you're right. Believe it or not, we are coming to a close here. It always goes.
How did that happen?
I know, it always happens so quickly. But I would love to, if there's just one last thing you'd like to say about liminal space as a whole, in whatever way, what would you like to share about liminal space?
If you can get it, take it. That's my advice.
Recognize it when it happens, right?
And embrace it. It's nothing to be afraid of. Just see what the gift is in that time and in that space.
Yeah, I see it as the phoenix rising from the ashes, because there, in any change, it's a transition, a death and rebirth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I guess what I would say is, as I was thinking about it more, really life is liminal space, because we are always, right? I mean, there are the big things, but the reality is we are always moving from what was to what's to come, unless we can read the future, which some people have that ability, but we don't really know what's coming. And so if we can embrace it, as we've said, stop fighting it, and to a place of acceptance or surrender, then there is just a beauty to the flow of life. It is so much more easily said than done. But if we can get there, and I know we all can, and flow through life, just float on that river, there's just so much beauty, because change and evolution are just that. It is what it is, and we're here for that. When we came here to participate in that. So and I think, if I'm right, Sheila is going to be hosting us next time, and I think we might be thinking about change or not.
well, we definitely will be getting to that. But I have been doing some meditating and some writings and having conversations around different levels of immunity. So immunity is the hot topic these days. But it's not just about physical immunity or even cellular immunity. But what about emotional immunity? What about mental immunity? And we can go into spiritual immunity too. How can we amp up at all levels? It's not just about sanitizing the surfaces, though that's very, very important. Mm-hmm. But these other levels of our consciousness can lower or increase our immunity as well. And I'd love to have a conversation about what is really possible.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great. I love it.
What did you say, Terry?
I said, I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. That's awesome. Ladies, what's our next date? Anybody know? We're already heading into June. We're 2 weeks out.
Today.
So let's see. 4th? June 4th? Am I right?
June 4th.
Okay.
Yep.
Fantastic. And so, as you know, you can find us on Enlightened World Network. We're live streaming also in our new Facebook group. So we have the Broader Edge Facebook group. We would love for you to join us there and continue the conversation. We would love to hear what you have to say about this topic or any other topic that interests you. Let us know what you'd love to hear us talk about. And
please like us and share us.
Yeah. So the recording will always be posted on our Facebook, in our Facebook group, as well as other places, Enlightened World Network, and so please like us, share us, and let others know about what we're doing here. We are here to co-create the new future, and that's the candid conversations we're having, and we're thrilled to have you as a part of our family. So thank you. Anything else, ladies, before we sign off?
Just thank you for.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Everybody that was on Facebook watching with us and YouTube, and we've had comments from both places. And yeah, as Liz said, go join our group and let us know what you thought about this conversation today. Any input that you'd like to give us along the lines of liminal space and what was discussed here. We'd love to hear from you.
I just wanted to say, Liz, what a great topic. Thank you so much. It was really inspiring.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I loved it. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you, ladies. Always a pleasure to be with my girls. So.
Yay!
All right. I'm going to play our outro again.
Do it. Thank you, sweetie. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye, everybody.
Love.
Thanks for joining us on The Broader Edge. Our mission is to empower and engage you in shaping our tomorrow because your impact matters. Help us spread the word by liking and sharing on social media. Be sure to join us on alternate Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern on Enlightened World Network for candid conversations that envision a new future. The information, views and opinions expressed by The Broader Edge co-hosts, guests and associates are intended to inspire and empower you and should not be construed as medical, psychological, financial or legal advice.